Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Land Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I'm filming in my garage because it's raining outside, but it's beautiful. You know what I mean? It's great to have some rain because it gets rid of the forest fires and stuff, and then you have those beach days. It's a nice blend. I kind of like the nice blend of things, you know what I'm saying? Like nice harmony, you know, nice balance, Daniel son, balance. So today what I want to talk to you about is the natural bodybuilding scam. Now, I'm not talking about the natty or not debates that go on the internet. I'm talking about, say, real natural bodybuilders like myself and those people who perpetuate, you know, some training or some advice in order for you to gain muscle. And this is all great. But there was a comment that a guy made a few days ago. I don't know when I'm going to put this video up, but he actually made the comment yesterday. And I could tell he was really pissed off or frustrated and mad at anybody that teaches any sort of training advice, because obviously he's probably not got the results that he wanted. And so he's got a very large invested interest in saying that anybody that says you could look good as a natural bodybuilder or you could look like them, he would say that they are perpetuating a scam of some sort. So for me to give advice and say, hey guys, you can look like me or better than me, would be a scam in his opinion. At least that's what he was saying, as far as, let's just say he put a lot of words to it and he was a little bit angry. So anyway, the truth is that everybody has been screwed a few times in their life. So I'm not even mad at this guy for venting his frustration at me, because I can see what he's saying. And it would be wrong for me to say that anybody, regardless of their genetics, regardless of their priorities, and regardless of what way they train, you know, it would be wrong for me to say they're going to look like me or better. Now, it also would be egotistical of me to say that nobody could look better than me, because I have met people who have looked better than me. You know, even at my peak, they looked better than I did at my peak. So these were natural people, and I knew that great things were possible by living a drug-free, natural bodybuilding lifestyle and applying a lot of discipline, finding out what works for you, finding out the proper nutrition, and so forth. But I always met people that had differing level of genetics. Some people I met in the gym, I saw them train harder than anybody. They would be experimenting with all sorts of things. They'd have their notebooks and writing everything down. But if they or me walked on stage and we were in the same class somehow, like say height class or something, I would have blown them right off the stage, right? Because there's one thing that you cannot replace. And it's not just genetics, it's also time spent. And most people who are elite at something have spent an extraordinary amount of time pursuing that goal or ambition. And to elaborate even further, a lot of times those people got initiated at a very young age into lifting weights, bodybuilding, and that sort of lifestyle. So for me, you know, most of you guys know, but some of you might not know if you're new here, I grew up around a father who was a power lifter. I was in diapers in the gym, running around, and they'd just give me a volleyball, and then I'd go into the gymnasium that was next door to the gym, because this was a US Army base gym that was left over in this small town called Stephenville. And my dad would go in there and he would powerlift. He'd be doing his squats and his deadlifts, his bench presses and all that. And while he was training for an hour and a half, 2 hours, I'd be just throwing volleyballs at the net and then coming in and visiting my dad and distracting him from his workouts from time to time. And of course, there'd always be lots of men in there training and getting strong. So as a kid, you know, 5 years old, I'd want to impress them and try to lift a bar and fall down, and, you know, stuff like that would happen. And they would tolerate me to a point, and my brother. So what happened, I was naturally a smaller kid. And as I started to engage in sports like hockey or baseball or anything, my father would introduce me repeatedly to the bench press or to the chin-up bar and say, hey, come on, let's do a couple of chin-ups, let's do a couple of bench presses. That was an excuse for me to hang out with my dad a bit. But of course, once he was relying on my own discipline, I would kind of fall away. But the thing is that this would happen repeatedly. I think I started training on and off several times. By the time I was 13 years old, I had already been in and out of the gym about 7 or 8 times of training, you know, being introduced to lifting weights or doing some bench presses regularly or some chin-ups. So I knew that weight training was a solution for a problem. And usually it was associated with violence. Say you're too small to fight against the bigger kids. Well, that's what I would do. And I talked about this in grade 1. I faced off with this guy named David Biskey who broke all my crayons. And he'd bully me every lunch hour. So I went in the basement and did CrossFit. I basically just lifted a 20-pound bar over my head every time my dad worked out. I would just go down there and just lift that bar over my head for several sets. And in about a month, I was ragdolling this kid. Like just throwing him around like nothing when I was wrestling him. So the thing is that I was always weight training or doing some tension-oriented type of fitness. So I was developing. As I was growing and as I was going into puberty, I was telling the body how to develop as an adult. And this plays a factor in how your adult physique will develop. Right? If you look at guys like Lee Priest or any guy that started training when he was 11 years old or 12 years old, it does affect how the human body develops in adult years, right? That's why a lot of the Eastern Bloc type countries would start a kid in a sport at 4 or 5 years old. And they would train them right from the time they're almost out of the crib, and then they would be competing in the Olympics later on, right? But they would train them right from the time they were a child. So what I'm trying to say is, just because certain people have spent longer applying certain principles and they're saying, hey, these principles will help you gain more muscle and strength, you might or might not be able to look like them, but you will be able to get some benefit. And that's the whole point of teaching. If I won the Nobel Prize in physics, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't teach anybody some lower levels of information in order to help them in their life, right? Maybe some of those people will go on to have PhDs as well, but it doesn't mean all of them will. But it wouldn't mean that I'm ripping people off, you know what I'm saying? So this is really what I want to say. I am not selling you a dream. I'm selling you some techniques to take care of your physical health, along with gaining muscle and strength. And yes, some of you guys will or already do look better than I do, and I'm here to support that whole thing. But I'm by no means selling you an unrealistic goal by saying, hey, you're going to look like Mr. Olympia if you use one of my programs for 2 months. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I get the frustrations. You know, sometimes I think people are better off being a little bit ignorant at times, because when I was a teenager and I didn't know about all the IFBB guys being on drugs and stuff, I thought that was just a couple of them, but most of them were natural, right? I thought that I'd be able to get to 250 pounds at 5'8" and bench press 500 pounds for reps and all that. But yeah, I didn't make that goal. But because I had this sort of delusion, I was really motivated in moving in that direction. And I didn't look at what I couldn't do. I just looked at what I wanted to do. And I think you're better off doing that than convincing yourself into becoming a victim of life and that everything's impossible and I can't do it, you know? I think that belief is going to paralyze you more than a certain amount of delusion when it comes down to achievement, right? You know, sometimes you might, you know, look to achieve the mountain and maybe you get halfway up, but that's still something pretty good. You know? So anyway, I hope this helps out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgalantbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Mountain.